Welcome and hello. This is a video tutorial on HEC ResSim, and in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about simulations. This is part 3, so we've already done a couple of videos on simulations, but in this video, I want to talk about overrides. Once you've computed a simulation, you may want to disregard or override some of the decisions that were made. The override editor allows you to adjust the computed results for each time step of the simulation. What we have on the screen is our reservoir network. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the simulation module. Yes. Okay. And we need to create a simulation. So we'll go simulation new. I'll call this simulation 1. And then I'm going to use the same date times as before. Okay, the simulation is going to start on May 5th. It's going to end on May 15th. And then the look back period will start on May 1st. That will be at noon for each of the 3 times. All right, and we're using alternative 1. Okay, our network popped into place. Let's go ahead and run the simulation real quick, and then we'll work on the overrides. Before we look at the results, let me go ahead and show you what the network looks like. So if I click on Edit Reservoir Properties, we see we have 3 zones. The conservation zone is identified as the guide curve at 1440. Over on the physical tab, we have a pool with these dimensions. If you want to follow along, you can pause the video and type those in. And then I have one controlled outlet. In the past, I've been using an uncontrolled outlet. This is a controlled outlet, and then you can see the max capacity for this outlet based on the elevation. And there's also 5 separate gates. So the total is going to be 5 times the max capacity of one single gate. All right. So 5,000 CFS is what we are releasing through this upstream junction. It's flowing into the reservoir, and 5,000 CFS, all 5 gates, would correspond to an elevation of about 1473, more or less. Okay, let's go back to look at those results now. Right click and plot. Let me hide the legend. Okay, so what we see is the reservoir begins filling up. Once 1440 is the elevation of the reservoir, the release happens, but there's not enough capacity at the elevation of 1440 to release to keep up with the 5,000 CFS inflow, and that's why we see the elevation continuing to rise. So that's what's happening here. And then down below, this is a plot of the flow itself, which starts early May 6th and then increases. It approaches 5,000 CFS. If we look at the table data, we see the releases don't actually get to 5,000 CFS. There's 4749 right here. So I may want to extend the time period of the simulation. So I'll click Simulation and then Edit. Let's go ahead and extend another 10 days. So we'll say it goes to May 25th. Okay. Compute. Now let's look at those results. Yes, much better. So an extra 10 days was good. We can see that the final flow rate's 4926, so it's still approaching 5,000, but not quite there. Okay, let's go ahead and add an override now. So if I right click, I can go ahead and override the alternative, or I can, like in the previous video, create a trial, new trial. I'll just call the trial modified release 1. Okay, and okay, I'm first going to run the simulation as is for this trial 1. Okay, and it should be the same results as the alternative because I didn't change anything. Then right click, edit run. This is only for the trial. And then we've done reservoirs and modified the time series inflow. If we click the overrides button, this gives us a few different tabs to work with. Along the top, we have target elevation, release, capacity, and storage. If we click storage, there is a warning here about disrupting mass balance computation, so I'm going to stay away from that. If I click on the release, I can modify these releases here. So it starts off at 2000, then 3400, 3500, and so on. Let me go ahead and just demonstrate the different ways to change the values for this override. If I just want to change one value, I could select that cell, and then type in a number. If I wanted to, for that number to be applied to multiple cells, I could just highlight all the cells, right click, fill. Now we have a few options. Repeat fill just repeats the same number for all the selected uh, time periods. And I click OK, and that filled that in. If I want to clear a single record, I could just click on that record and then unspecify. It goes back to the original. And then if I want to clear multiple records, I could unspecify all. I don't have to highlight them all. Another way to modify records is by linear interpolation between the first and the last record. So if I said, say 10, and this is 15, and then I highlighted them, I could just right click, fill, linear fill, and then those integers filled in appropriately. If I want to multiply them all, I could right click, fill, and then multiple factor. We could just say 2, click OK, and then they all multiplied by 2. And then we can also add, this is the last option, add a constant if we just want to add, say, 100, and then click OK. They all get 100. Okay, so I'm going to unspecify all. Those are the different options and tools that allow the user to more easily make override changes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just change this to 2000, and then I'm going to copy it down for a day or two. Right click, fill, and then repeat fill. Okay, apply. And the thumbnail sketch over to the right, updated. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that, and we can see the original line and then the override release line here. If I zoom in, you can see it maybe a little bit better. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. We'll see how that affects our results. When I click OK, compute, close, right click, plot. And now what we see in the plot here, let me hide the legend, is that 2000 CFS release that extended for a couple days here before 5000 CFS release. So that's one example of how override works specifically for the release. Let's do another example. I'm just going to go ahead and override again. These values here, I'm going to unspecify. Now what I'm going to do is make some sort of impossible scenario to show that ResSim won't violate the physical constraints of the system. Instead of 2000, we could just say 8000. Now let me go ahead and copy those same values. Fill, repeat, okay. Apply. Here's our thumbnail sketch. We have a release of 8000 for the first maybe like 3 days. And then let's run that simulation and see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, compute, and then right click on the plot. And what we see here is the same as the original because it's not possible to release 8000 CFS through our outlet capacity based on the reservoir outlet structures. Because if I go over to controlled outlet, then the maximum outflow is 5500 CFS, and that's with a water surface elevation at 1500. So that's a quick example about how the overrides work. You can modify the pool elevation or the release or a few other factors to see how the results of a simulated compute would look in ResSim.